everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game news. It is March 25th, 2021, and these are the top stories of the day. To kick things off, we have an update, which is really cool. As you can see here, this is a picture of Ghost of Tsushima, but specifically today, I want to talk about the Ghost of Tsushima movie that's going to be created by Sony and PlayStation Studios. We learned that someone interesting is going to be in charge of the project, and that is Chad Stahelski. He is from The Matrix, and perhaps better known these days from John Wick. So I think that having someone like that on board is going to help the movie have a good vision. So I'm hopeful. It's a solid game, and we got free DLC late last year, multiplayer added on, and I could see that this could potentially be a good video game film. Let's see how Uncharted does first before we get too hopeful. But Uncharted with Tom Holland as the lead character, as Nathan Drake, sounds like a cool ride. Hopefully it turns out well, and let's see how Sony PlayStation's future IP do when it comes to their film and TV adaptations. Speaking of video game movies, Mortal Kombat is coming out April 16th. It's going to be streaming in HBO Max, and of course theaters were available. But we found out recently that it's going to push a hard rated R. We knew it was going to be an R-rated film, but we learned that they're really pushing just how far you could get it when it comes to blood, gore, and amount of violence. Not to the point where it's unwatchable or where it's not releasable before, getting something like an NC-17 or X rating, But it should be one of the most gory, blood-filled, violent, rated R movies of all time. Potentially. Not that that's mandatory, but this is Mortal Kombat. It's a series that has been around for many years, early 90s, and a good part of it is known for its violence, fatalities, and then eventually brutalities, babyalities, animalities, all of the alities, of course, you have a good story, you have good characters, you have, a set of moves and an overall gameplay style that kind of, even though it borrows elements from Street Fighter, which came before it, it sits on its own in a different feeling type of fighting game. And of course, these days, it's probably as successful as it's ever been, and probably as culturally relevant as ever, with guest characters, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, Sylvester Stallone's Rambo, and so forth. So anyhow, Mortal Kombat has become pretty big, but a big part of it is the violence behind it. That's kind of what got it on the mark in the first place. So I guess in staying faithful to the original, it will be a very violent film, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Appropriate ages should watch it, of course. Hopefully they nail the story, the characters, the actors look good. So keep my fingers crossed for next month, which is coming up really soon. It's April 16th. We're looking at just a little over 3 weeks right now from the 25th of March. So more on that when it comes out. I'll be putting up a review of sorts when I see the film. Next up, it is Thursday, so it's time to talk Famitsu Sales. Once again, this is courtesy of Chris1964 from the ResetEra.com forums, putting it out nicely. You could get this information anywhere, but I like to go here. I like to engage with the community, as I always say, and it's just a nice place to talk with like-minded gamers about sales data. So coming up at number 1, software sales. At the first spot is Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury with 37,000 copies sold. You're looking at only a 10% drop from the previous week, breezing past the 500,000 mark in just physical units. Very impressive. And number 2 is Densha de Go by Square Enix with 24,000. New title. Number 3, Momotaro Dentetsu just doesn't stop. Only a 20% drop from the previous week. 20,000 new copies added physically. Well past 2 million total. Jacques Jean at number 4 with 15,000. Number 5, Ring Fit Adventure, 14,000. Only a 21% drop. These are small drops from these Nintendo Evergreen titles. Number 6 is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with 11,000. Only a 3% drop from its previous week. Wild. Number 7, another new title, the third new title in this list, which is Apex Legends Champion Edition for Nintendo Switch by Electronic Arts with 11,000 copies sold. Number 8 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with 10,000. Number 9, Animal Crossing New Horizons. It looks like Animal Crossing lasted the whole year. You've got 52 weeks in a row of this thing being on the top 10. Very impressive. That does not happen too often. 9,500 for the week. Almost 6.7 million physical sales alone in Japan. Adding in digital, this thing's just another monster. And that's actually a segue for later on. Number 10, Minecraft for Nintendo Switch, 9,320, up 7% from its previous week. Overall, the top 10 saw Nintendo Switch with 10, nothing else. If you go later down in the list into the top 30, which we don't have yet at this time, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a PS4 title or so, or two, maybe. But overall, it's Nintendo domination over in Japan, and props to Animal Crossing for lasting. Only a 5% drop from the previous week. Really impressive. Now, I said Monster Hunter. Well, I said monster in what Animal Crossing is. And the segue was Monster Hunter Rise. It comes out this Friday. So by next week, Thursday, we will be looking at how well did Monster Hunter Rise do on Nintendo Switch in its debut weekend. What kind of numbers is that game going to pull off? It will no doubt be number 1. But will it sell over 1 million? Yeah. Over 1.5? I think so. Could it top 2 million? You're looking at 2 million copies sold of Monster Hunter Rise in just the opening weekend. You're looking at a couple days worth of availability. It's certainly possible. I wouldn't be surprised if it hits it, but 2 million, that would be fantastic. Let's talk about that later on and speculate more, but for now, let's go over the hardware. On the hardware side, Nintendo Switch had a very healthy week. I was thinking to myself, if it could do another 80,000 this week, that's going to be solid, because in no way it was going to match up last year's. And it did 89,104. Last week, 72,610. So you're looking at 16,500 copies more sold this week than last week. Of course, of all of the weeks so far in 2021, there's only been one, now 2 weeks, where 2021 was behind 2020 for that equivalent, that respective week. This is the second time, and that's because last year Animal Crossing came out on this week, a year ago. So there was no way that Nintendo Switch was going to be able to top that. Last year, the system for this week sold 392,576 units. We have a cool thing going on where the year to date, so far in 2021, like I said, all but 1 week have been up for Nintendo Switch over their respective weeks for last year. But this beast of a week in Animal Crossing last year compared to this year's still healthy 89,000 brought 2020's up to 1.4 million, which means that now, where we were like 300,000 plus ahead of last year, now we're only 60,000 ahead. So 2021 is still winning. It's still outpacing the overall hardware sales of Nintendo Switch last year. But will it continue? Well, next week, we're going to have Monster Hunter Rise. And just how many Nintendo Switch units will sell? If it sells at least 233,000 units, it will still be that Nintendo Switch total in 2021 is outselling Nintendo Switch in 2020 for the respective amount of weeks leading up to the first week's conclusion of the last week of March / the first week of April. So that would be pretty impressive. I think Nintendo Switch will sell at least 250,000. My guess on the safe side is 250,000 for next week. So I think that's where I'm going. 2 million for Monster Hunter Rise, 250,000 for Nintendo Switch. I would love to be wrong and have that 2 million be shattered with like 2.7 million. And I would love to be wrong and have that 250,000 expectation of Nintendo Switch on the hardware side to be, 350,000 or something like that. We'll see, we'll see. But overall, very healthy. I think it's safe to say that by this time next week, we will be looking at in excess of 19 million Nintendo Switch units sold for the lifetime in Japan. PlayStation 5 had a pretty healthy week with 34,657 units sold. That puts it pretty much neck and neck, just down a couple thousand from the previous week. But it looks like Sony's doing better with stock in Japan, so that's nice. PS4 hanging in there, 2,578. Xbox Series with actually a pretty good bump of almost 2.5 times the previous week, 1,929 units sold, I should say. And 3DS still hanging in there, just a few copies shy of last week with 814 for this week. So overall, you're looking at a pretty healthy week. Hardware side, interesting stuff. Interesting, to think of what's gonna be like with Monster Hunter Rise. It comes out tomorrow, which in Japan at this point it is tomorrow. And see if PS5 could handle things going forward, comparable levels in that 30,000 range. Can Microsoft, release, several thousand per week? Will the audience in Japan buy it? From the few people that I have spoken with online, when it comes to Xbox Series S and X in Japan, Game Pass is something that's liked. It's not that Microsoft has this giant audience there with the Xbox brand of consoles, but those that do have it seem to like Game Pass, so that's nice. Maybe word will spread. My hopes is that the Series brand of Xbox consoles will become Microsoft's best-selling Xbox machine in Japan. Don't know if that's going to be the case yet, but hopefully for them. That's going to do it this week for video game news. It's on the shorter side, I suppose, but 12 minutes-ish isn't bad. Let me know what you thought of the Mortal Kombat Hard R news. Let me know what you think of Ghost of Tsushima and that film. Do you think it's going to be solid? Are you looking forward to it? And if you're interested enough, talk to me about the sales data. Are you excited about it? What do you think is going to be like next week with Monster Hunter Rise? Don't forget, in addition to the game and a collector's edition of the game, they got a Pro Controller coming out, new Joy-Cons coming out, a new Nintendo Switch model coming out with the perma decals, emblazoned on into the system, right? So that's kind of cool too. All right. Talk to you all later. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. This is PGN signing out. Bye.